Welcome, everyone. I'm Bill Newell with MSO News Sports, and we have the sports writers here with us from the Salem News, Matt Williams, Nick Giannino. In just a moment, I think we'll have Phil Stacy. You guys are on deadline here as we talk on Tuesday evening. So we'll get, hopefully Phil will be with us in just a few moments. We're going to reverse things a little bit. We're going to hold football for a few more minutes here, but let's get to I suppose it's the big story here on the North Shore, and yet it's not an athletic story in sports. But Bishop Fenwick, Matt, I know you've been writing about this, is taking the MIAA to court. They had an 18-page document, I guess, that they filed. And what can you tell me about that?
Well, they'll go to the Superior Court in Newburyport a week from today, as we record Monday. And I'm sorry, it's Tuesday today, so a week from yesterday, as we record, and they will seek an injunction that, if granted, would I guess allow them to return to the postseason. Now, the timing on that is a bit suspicious, as we know. When you get an injunction, it's sort of to prevent something that you might lose, that you might never get back, should you win the case, right? Basically, because you can't turn back the clock. So let's say they go to court and the case, the wheels of justice turn slowly, right? So let's say they decide the thing in December or January. Well, it's too late to get them back in the fall season, right? So that's what the injunction is for. So in that sense, not being an attorney, I wonder if they may prevail on the injunction and then eventually lose on the merits, because the Supreme Judicial Court last year issued a ruling that was heavily in favor of the MIAA and basically upheld the MIAA's power to govern its tournaments and its eligibility however it wants. I would liken it to Deflategate for everybody out there. Basically all along, those in the know said Roger Goodell has the power to do whatever he wants. And my personal reading of the situation is that the MIA has that too, and that eventually it will get to a level where Fenwick will lose, just like the Patriots and Brady lost. Now, as we remember, Brady played a whole year and then was suspended the following year as it wound its way through the courts. So I think there's a possibility that happens. You kick the can down the road. What would the MIA do in that case? Like, are they going to hold fast to the punishment if that's the case, if it's a year from now and they get this injunction? That I don't know. But that's sort of my reading on it. I found it interesting that Fenwick's attorney is a fella based out of Middleton who has twice beaten the MIA in court on eligibility issues, both in 2017 and again in 2021. But again, that SJC ruling that sort of set a new precedent of the MIA's power came after, those two cases. So I think, that's sort of reason to root for both sides, right? If you're Fenwick, you're saying, well, you know what? This guy's done it before. Maybe he can do it again. And if you're the MIA, you're saying, well, this 2022 ruling by the SJC sort of changes the scorecard a little bit. I think from Fenwick's perspective, it's like, hey, we have nothing to lose, right? Except for money, paying the lawyers. If we lose, we're not in the tournament. If we didn't try, we wouldn't have been in the tournament anyway. So, now they can look at their kids and their donors and their parents and say, hey, you know what? At least we tried, right? So there's really nothing to lose, I guess. But that's sort of my base reading on it, my take on it. I mean, I don't know if you guys have any thoughts or questions or whatnot.
I think you actually put a good circle spin on that thing to bring the different perspectives out. As you mentioned, I whenever this happened, I always was thinking, geez, it seems like there should be more of a response from Fenwick, or the Fenwick community or something like that. And there it is right there with this lawsuit, I guess.
I mean, I think from their perspective, and not to put words in their mouth, but I think they hoped that it wouldn't get to this point.
Sure.
They kept saying, we hope cooler heads will prevail and this will be lessened and, not punish some of the kids that had nothing to do with it. And obviously that's, a fraud issue. But really, to me, the biggest hurdle here is going to be the timing. Um, what do you do if this is adjudicated in January? Let's say you get the injunction, the fall teams play, and then the MIA prevails in January. It's like, oh, well, the football team got to play in the playoffs, but now the girls basketball team is out because of the timing on this. That's a real possibility, right? I mean, I don't know how fast this is going to get to a trial level. Provided that there's no summary judgment. I mean, again, the wheels of justice turn slowly. There are serious issues in courts that obviously take precedence. It's a first come. In some ways, it's a first come, first serve. In other ways, I'm sure that they would have more pressing issues. I mean, again, not an attorney. Like, please, I'm sure there'll be all sorts of folks out there on Twitter, maybe that are more experts than myself, that'll say, "Oh, Willie, you're talking out of your keister. You got this wrong. You got that wrong, right?" So, full disclosure, like, I'm not sure. I've been watching Suits, on Netflix, but that's about the extent of my legal knowledge here. So, but again, like, I just wonder. And I keep going back to that NFL case with Brady and the Patriots, right? I mean, that took a year to 18 months to wind its way through all those courts, by the time the NFL actually prevailed. So, we could be in for the long haul on this thing, potentially. And again, like, with the way that the seasons go, my concern right away is like, oh, well, geez, like, what if they get a bad ruling, after the fall and the winter, and then the spring sports take it on the chin, or vice versa. I mean, that's just like that. There's a lot of very difficult things that could come out of this. It goes beyond just a simple pass fail, yes, no.
The other thing too, Phil, Matt, is that you could be kicking the can down the road. In other words, maybe football does play postseason. Maybe the injunction works and they're reinstated for the playoffs in football. And when they come back, they could go back in, like you said, for winter sports or spring sports. But then you still would assume that there's another year tacked onto this for Fenwick, a total 12 months, if you will. That's what the MIAA said before.
Yeah,
my other full disclosure, Matt, is I'm watching Suits too. We're watching Suits, and
I love it.
It's crazy. And I played softball with attorney Leo Fama, so he's a pretty good hitter. Let me just tell you that. So
he's a heavy hitter, I'm sure.
He is a heavy hitter, and I'm sure Fenwick hopes he can hit one out of the park here in the courtroom here. But good guy.
And what if there's a decision made in the middle of a tournament, right? I mean, just take football. Like, let's say they make the Super Bowl, right? and then the ruling comes down. Like, I'm just gonna make this up. Like, let's say the Super Bowl's on December 8th, and the ruling comes down on December 5th. What the hell is the state gonna do in that case? Cancel the Super Bowl? Like, come up with some runner-up? Like, that would be a nightmare scenario. And I mean, it's not impossible.
Well, I heard
they wouldn't be starting in the playoffs to begin with.
No, if they get the injunction, though, and then they lose.
Oh, you're saying it'll be put on pause, so they'll be able to compete in the playoffs for the time being until.
Well, that's what an injunction is, right? So the emergency hearing is just.
Yeah, I know less about this than you, clearly.
Well, you're not watching Suits, are you?
I'm not watching
Suits. Exactly. You gotta watch Suits. You gotta learn about it. But yeah, so an injunction means that you get a pause.
Yeah.
Okay. Basically, because they say, okay, there's enough damage here that if basically the court is saying, well, there's a 50-50 chance that Fenwick could win, and if they do win, you can't go back in time and give the tournament back to these kids.
Right.
So we have to pause the punishment until such time as we can decide the case. In layman's terms, and so that's what happens on Monday. I don't know when the actual trial date is set for, but that could be there. That could be weeks out, months out. So that's kind of the issue there.
Matt, they're also, I think the MIAA is doing like a week-long Super Bowl thing. So Fenwick better hope that Division 5 gets played on Monday or whenever they're doing that. You know what I mean?
You
know,
make a great point.
we don't want that Saturday Division 5 game. We want to get it over with on Monday. Yeah.
You make a great point. That is that is very interesting, and even I mean, it seems time-wise since the Super Bowls are the last thing, right? But even in the regular tournament, I mean, what if they win let's say one of the girls' teams wins a first round game and then they get sacked, right? Like, are you going to give their opponent a bye and call it a forfeit? Are you going to take the team that they beat and move them along instead? Like,
yeah.
It's just, there's a lot of layers there. It's thorny to say the least. And not that we shouldn't expect that. And I'm sure the state's been thinking about this, and the lawyers will make the arguments that, hey, if you do this, it's going to open up a Pandora's box of all these situations that these yahoos on the podcast were talking about. Maybe this podcast will be entered into the record. I don't know.
Yeah.
I certainly hope not. I don't want to be deposed.
No, I doubt that will happen. That's my guess. But well, the other thing I suggest, maybe next week we all wear suits.
That's not a bad idea.
That's not a bad idea.
Mine's not that nice. I can't,
If we're tackling these kind of topics, I think we might as well dress for it next
dress
week.
The part, yeah.
But we'll maybe it won't be on the agenda next week. All right.
We dress for the jobs we have, not the ones we want.
All right, let's just quickly go before we get to football. Nick, what can you tell us about boys soccer? What's the breaking news in boys soccer? We obviously were negligent last week in our boys soccer coverage here in the podcast.
Yeah.
And it's all your fault too, Nick. It's all your fault.
It's all my fault. I should have chimed in, cut Phil off, and no more football for the day. But now it's good timing because I got my my corner kick soccer column coming out tomorrow, and I highlighted a bunch of teams this week, but want to start with Beverly, and I've been liking what I've been seeing from them. Their head coach Edgar De Leon was out sick for a couple weeks, and they still were able to get some positive results, despite having him not on the sidelines. And I wrote about Wilson De Leon, who's their senior captain. He's kind of been their leading scorer, leading attack guy for a few years now, and he continues to do that this season. But heading into the year, they were really looking for that second scoring punch, that second striker that could kind of line up alongside Wilson and work together and hopefully produce more goals. And they didn't really know what they had there. Maybe some young guys coming up or new players that hadn't seen varsity time that might be able to make an impact. But they actually had been getting plenty of production from an Italian exchange student. He's a senior, Gustavo Majoli, I believe is how you pronounce his name. And I got to watch their game against Peabody a couple weeks ago. I try and spread the wealth with the soccer coverage, so I haven't seen many of these teams more than once. And the one game I did see, Beverly against Peabody, I was really impressed with this kid, Gustavo. He kind of plays a little bit different brand of soccer, very physical. He's very vocal out there. Edgar was joking with me that they got to be careful because if they pick up too many yellow cards, it could come back to bite them in the playoffs. But he's a kid that's not going to back down from a challenge, and he's been scoring the ball. He's got 6 goals so far. I feel like he's improved as the season's gone on. And he's just proven to be that extra scoring punch that they were looking for. So it's really helped them, and Beverly's right up there in the top 25 in the Division I rankings, which obviously is a gauntlet. They got some great wins under the belt. They just beat Marblehead 2-0 the other day. They've beaten some good teams. They're going to be matching up against Andover, a Division I team, this Saturday, and they got a big stretch of 9 games in 16 days coming up. So I think we'll learn a lot about them during that stretch. And so definitely wanted to highlight that kid. They're sitting at 5-3-2. I don't know if I mentioned that. Solid record. And then Peabody is another team that was looking for a goal scorer to kind of take over this year, and they lost a lot of talent last year with Victor Maciel and John Arruda, who just exploded, nearly set a program record for goals there. He's thriving up at UMass Boston. But yeah, they were looking for that new guy to step in and take over that scoring role, like Beverly and this kid Abu Kaba, who played for their team as a freshman, but played football the past 2 seasons. And Willie, you can probably speak to his athleticism a little bit, just seeing him on the football field, I'm sure. But he's translated beautifully back to the pitch, and he's leading them in scoring, close to 10 goals for him, if not 10 on the dot. And just a player that kind of has a natural skill. You see it on the football field. He's very fast, and he's a smart player, but he's been doing a bulk of the scoring for them. And Stan McKeon, their head coach, was joking with me. He thinks he might try and take on a few too many defenders at times. They're sending double and triple teams at him, and he wants to dribble around them and score. And he's been able to do that on occasion, but they're a better team when, he reads the play correctly and is able to facilitate a little bit. And they're starting to score more goals. They've got, 8 goals in their last, 7 goals in their last 2 games, and then 5 goals in the game before that. So 12 goals in their last 3, which is pretty good for a team that was kind of struggling to find their way offensively at the beginning of the year. And their defense has been great. So, they're hanging around right there at 5-2-2, and they're right next to Beverly in the Division I rankings. So those are 2 teams that kind of struck my eye in recent weeks. And obviously I could talk about St. John's Prep any day. They're still lighting it up. They've got like 3 straight shutout wins. They're right towards the top of the standings in the rankings in Division I. Swampscott is a team that's really stood out in Division III. Got a chance to catch up with their head coach, Adam Bailey, today. And they've had an impressive year right now, 7-2. They're the number 10 seed in D3. Kind of doing it quietly, right? You don't think of Swampscott as a soccer powerhouse, at least in the last few seasons, but they've really turned it around. And a lot of credit to Lucas Barreau. He's leading the way with 15 goals for them, second only to, I think, Gloucester's Gino Tripoli, who has 19 in terms of the area scoring. So he's been really impressive, and that's going to be a team to watch, certainly in Division III.
Nice. Good stuff. Anything else you guys want to touch on before we jump into football? I think we're.
No, I think it's pretty good, unless you want to touch on some girls soccer, Willie. Any teams making a push right now?
I mean, Hamilton Wenham remains undefeated. The Gens are kind of quietly having one of the best seasons in the area. We don't talk about the Cape Ann League as much as we do the NEC, but the Gens in 10 games have only allowed 2 goals, which is pretty impressive. Still in the top 4 there in Division 4. They've kind of been oscillating a little bit between as high as 2nd, as low as 5th, and they'll probably be right there at the end. I mean, they won the state title 2 years ago, and they got a veteran team, so certainly been impressed by what they have to offer. And this Friday in conference action, we'll have Masconomet against Danvers, which will decide most likely the conference championship. Masco beat Danvers the first time around, and if they sweep them, they're almost certainly going to repeat as league champs. And if they don't, then Danvers will tighten things up a little bit. Now, Swampscott, a very young team, coached by a first-year coach, Jamie Caponegro. They got, a lot of freshmen in the lineup. They stole a tie off of Danvers last week. So even if Danvers beats Masco, they'll still be a point behind. And I think Swampscott's a team to look out for in the, the Division III state tournament, because, they have so many young players. They play such a tough schedule, and they're certainly a team to look out for the next 2 or 3 years as those young players get older. I mean, I think something like, last week when I had my column, I think it was something like 12 of their 15 goals had been scored by freshmen, something along those lines. And I think it's even more now because their freshman, Greta Sifkin, is up in the double digits for goals now. So young team to look out for over there in Swampscott for sure.
I saw,
as you mentioned, Masco there briefly, Willie. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention them on the boys' side too, because they're our only unbeaten team. Kind of just 9-0-1. I think they have the one tie against Peabody, which was a great game. But yeah, they're I guess we don't think about them every day, because every year they just keep doing this, right? They just keep piling up the wins. Jared Scarpacci's record as a head coach there is just ridiculous over the past 10 years or so. So they're right in the mix in Division II once again, and some very impressive play for them. Could highlight a couple of their players. Ara Scarpacci, the coach's son, is leading the way with 9 goals, and then they got a bunch of other guys with at least 2. So it's a balanced attack. Jack Wexler has been a terrific facilitator for them, and Marco Russo is holding it down in net with 5 shutouts. They've got a lot of they've held a lot of good teams to 1 or no goals this season. So balance all the way through for Masco.
I'd like to know how many, if any, other schools in the state have unbeaten boys and girls soccer teams. There can't be that many.
No, you're probably right on that. I'd have to do some research, but I don't know if there's any.
So good things up there in Boxford, especially considering that they have no home field and no scoreboard. So
Right.
the teams are doing better than the administrators up there.
Yeah, they're playing in Middleton tomorrow, I think, against Peabody, which, another good game there, rematch from the last time they drew even. So
Just a quick volleyball note. I know that Marblehead and Danvers were playing. Marblehead and Peabody were playing tonight. I didn't get a score on that, but the Hamilton Wenham girls soccer team won today, right? I think they won over Triton 3-0. They're 9-0-1.
That's right.
You were mentioning that. So and Ipswich volleyball won again, the defending state champs. So let's just do. We don't have a lot of time left here, and because we did a lot of football last week. I guess really quickly, gentlemen, I'm just going to pull it out here. It looks like one of the key games on the North Shore would be Salem playing a Classical. That's a 5:00 game on Friday. We also, Willie, we have Peabody down at Danvers. That game's a highlight. Now, out of your list readership areas, you have unbeaten Linfield and unbeaten Amesbury also on Friday night in the Cape Ann League. Those are some of the games. And guys, maybe you want to make a quick comment on one of those games or a different one altogether that you might want to mention.
Well, I'll be at the Salem game versus Lynn Classical. Looking forward to that one. I've seen Salem blow out some teams, so hoping for a competitive one in that one. And Willie, you saw Classical gave Peabody a good run there, right, until Peabody exploded in the 4th.
Yes, huge game. I mean, Salem was, again, like they were 5-0 last year, right? And I think everybody kind of snickered at them and said, well, play some real teams, right? And we saw what happened. They went, lost 3 in a row and went 7-4 and didn't make the playoffs. And I think that, that team still has a chip on its shoulder from that. And they've definitely changed their schedule, played some quote unquote real teams and beaten them. And I think Classical's another one. And that's why Salem wants to play Classical, right? Is to challenge itself to try to get power points. It's going to be a really interesting matchup on the outside because John Naskey, a Classical, is one of the best receivers around, and Brian Vaughn Jr. is an excellent quarterback, and his dad, Brian Vaughn Sr., is a really good play caller. So Salem's going to have to find those guys on the outside. I mean, it's a chess match. Do you match strength and put Rocco Ryan over there? Do you match speed and put Albert Pujols over there? I mean, it's a really interesting matchup, and I think should be a great football game between two teams that have the ability to do damage in the playoffs. Classical, I believe, is in Division III and is kind of knocking on that door. And Salem, we haven't talked about it too much. They're in Division VI now. The last 3 weeks, they've been the #1 seed. So, I mean, they're not just a little plucky team that could have a good season. I mean, when you're #1 in the power rankings, like, you're a real threat to go to the Super Bowl. And I'm not sure that that's dawned on people on the North Shore just yet. Like, this Salem team is the real deal. Like, these power rankings show this could be a team that goes to a Super Bowl. Like, that's real,
Yeah.
and I think that's something that, again, like, just hasn't quite sunk in for people yet. But in all sports, that's sort of been the history of these power rankings. If you're in the top 4, and certainly if you're #1, you're going deep, and there's a decent chance you're going to the final.
Let me just add to. Go ahead, Nick. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say we didn't recap any of the games, obviously, from last week, but got to highlight quickly Quinn Rocco Ryan's performance there. Had to be an all-time game for the Salem High program with even with the history they've had. What do you have? 5 touchdowns, over 200 all-purpose yards or close to it, and scored on special teams, scored on defense, scored on offense. I mean, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, they tied a school record, I believe.
Yeah, Vinny Gaskins, right? Didn't Vinny Gaskins have 5?
I believe that's correct.
The other thing too about this game with Salem is, like you were mentioning, Willie, the power rankings, they are for real. I haven't seen them play, but this will be a big test for them because this classical team is 4-1. They're one loss to Peabody, and they have Revere next week, this classical. And then what could be the game for the Greater Boston League title, they take on Everett, and that's it. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
And then it's the playoffs. I mean, so you have classical a potential league champion, or at least they're fighting for it for sure in the Greater Boston League, in a league that includes Everett. And then you've got Salem where they are right now, undefeated, and having knocked off Danvers earlier this year and so on. It's been 19 years since they beat classical too, Salem.
Wow.
So this will be a
I didn't
big
realize
one.
that.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, so we'll see what happens there. Willie, do you want to touch on the Tanners at all? They're undefeated and they're going to Winthrop on Thursday night, a Thursday night game this week.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, in some ways you think it could be a trap game, right? Because it's a short week and because Winthrop always plays everybody tough. At the same time, Peabody just finds a way to win close games. I mean, their road game against Leominster was close in the second half. They jumped out to a 20-0 lead and then kind of had to hold on a little bit, got some timely turnovers. But, Scalise, the kicker, had I think 10 points in the game, including a 47-yarder. And, Alex Silva and Eli Batista just keep finding ways to get things done. So they are, they're doing their thing. They're going to show up and try to play as well as they can. But I don't think, you can ever assume that you're going to beat Winthrop in Winthrop, right? I mean, that's a tough place to play. So I think, if you're Peabody, you got to tell your kids that, that game's got trap game written all over it. And you can't let it, you got to try not to let it happen. That's sort of my take on that one.
I want to make sure before we leave, we have a couple of minutes left here. Right? We don't neglect the Endicott football team. Now they were off last week. They had a bye. They didn't play. And what happens? They go up in the rankings for NCAA Division III rankings in football. Number 20 in one of the polls. And so that's great. They've never been that high in a national poll in the young, if you will, football program at Endicott. But they host the University of New England on Saturday at noontime, and they're I guess it's the homecoming senior day or whatever, all going on there at Endicott on Saturday at noon. But congratulations to them. They get back into it. They're stepping off the second half of the regular season this weekend, and as are the other teams here on the North Shore for the most part, I guess. Yeah. So anything else you guys want to mention, football or something else that we didn't touch on?
I think just some big games this weekend, some tough games that were tough to call as far as the favorite and the underdog go. I felt that way about Hamilton Wenham and Essex Tech. I think that's a real pick'em. Linfield and Amesbury is a real pick'em, tough one to decide. There were a few others in there that are just really interesting games. We're getting into the nitty gritty here. Only 3 weeks to playoffs, so every game is important and every game is has a lot of meaning.
I get the feeling there's going to be some real misses this week on those picks. I don't know. I have that feeling of maybe I don't know. There's so many. I'm not saying they're toss-ups, but there are basically, I think, a lot of toss-up games as far as we know. Like you were saying, Willie. Yeah.
Who won the picks last week, Willie? Who had the best record?
I think I had the best record last week. 2 weeks ago, Bill here had a perfect week. Went
Perfect
12
week.
So
I don't think I've ever done that in all my years at the news. So well done, Bill.
Or maybe you're doing less games now, or whatever. Who knows? But
I don't know.
We try to spread it around as best we can. It doesn't always work out perfectly.
Well, there's plenty of embarrassment coming my way, I think, here. So, but whatever.
No,
all right.
Well, holding up the pole position so far.
I know. It's amazing. What is, that's just amazing. It's wrong. Something's wrong. This is fixed. Something's up, Would the MIAA investigate this?
It could be beginner's luck. I don't know.
I want to apologize too to Marblehead. I picked them as my upset 3 weeks in a row. I picked them to win the first game against Fenwick. So 4 weeks in a row, I had them win, and they lose all 4. I said, I'm hopping off the train. I saw Masco play. I felt good about it. And then Marblehead went and shut them out 20-0. So maybe I'll hop back on the Marblehead train down the stretch here.
You and I both did that. And I jumped off a week earlier. And but during that whole time you and I were talking, I felt the same way you did last week. Like, this is going to happen. It's not going to work out. I should have stuck with them, but I I bailed after a couple of losses, I think.
Well, they got a big boost getting Andy Palmer back, and Willie and I were talking about how, having good players, even if it's one guy, makes a really big difference. So maybe they can turn things around here.
Be a game changer.
Yep.
All right, gentlemen. Great talking with you. We missed Phil, but he's probably working on a breaking story here tonight on the for the paper. So do check out the Salem News on Wednesday. And gentlemen, have a great week ahead, and we'll talk again soon.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you, Bill.